I was 19 years old when it happened, and even now, years later, I still can't walk alone at night when it's snowing. That evening, the temperature had dropped faster than expected. Snow started falling heavily just after sunset, thick and quiet, the kind that absorbs sound instead of making it. I missed the last bus home and decided to walk. It was only a 20-minute walk, and I'd done it plenty of times before. At first, everything felt normal. The streets were empty, houses were dark. My boots made the only sound as they pressed into fresh snow. After a few minutes, I noticed how silent everything had become. No cars, no wind, not even distant traffic. About halfway home, I passed a row of parked cars along the road. One of them caught my attention, not because it was unusual, but because the snow around it looked wrong. There was a small mound beside the driver's door, slightly higher than the rest of the snowbank. I assumed it was just uneven accumulation and kept walking. That's when I saw it shift. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then a hand pushed up through the snow. I stopped walking instantly. The hand was pale, fingers stiff, trembling as if struggling against something heavy. Snow slid off as the hand clawed upward, followed by an arm. Before I could move or scream, a man's head broke through the surface. His eyes were wide open, staring straight at me. His mouth was stretched open, but no sound came out. His skin looked gray, almost blue, like he'd been buried there for a long time. For a split second, I thought he was trapped and needed help. Then he smiled. He didn't pull himself up slowly. He launched upward with impossible strength, sending snow everywhere as he stood up in one sudden motion. He was taller than me, thin to the point of looking unnatural, and completely silent. He lunged. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just reacted. I turned and sprinted as fast as I could, slipping and nearly falling several times. I didn't look back, not once. I ran all the way home and slammed the door shut behind me, my hands shaking so badly I could barely lock it. I called the police and tried to explain what I had seen, but even as I said it out loud, it sounded insane. They arrived about 20 minutes later. We went back to the spot together. By then, fresh snow had covered most of the road. The officers searched the area thoroughly, around the cars, the sidewalk, even the nearby yards. There was nothing. No disturbed snow, no hole, no sign that anyone had been buried there. One officer crouched down and studied the ground carefully. He pointed out something that made my stomach drop. The snow was perfectly level. If someone had been under it, there would have been a collapse, a hollow, something. There wasn't. They found only one set of footprints in the entire area. Mine. The police suggested stress, exhaustion, maybe even a hallucination caused by the cold. They left soon after. That night, I stood by my bedroom window and watched the snow fall, terrified that I'd see the ground move again. I never did. But every winter, when the snow gets deep enough, I still think about what that officer said. Because if no one was buried under the snow, then whatever I saw must have been waiting there the whole time. This happened during my winter break in college, when most students had already left campus and gone home. I stayed behind because my family lived only a few towns away, and I planned to visit a friend instead. One night, a snowstorm rolled in faster than expected. By the time it was dark, the snow was coming down hard enough that visibility dropped to just a few feet. Around 9 p.m., my friend texted me saying his power had gone out and asked if I could come over. His house was less than a mile away, so I decided to walk. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time. The streets were almost completely empty. Snow covered everything: roads, sidewalks, parked cars, turning the town into something quiet and unfamiliar. The only sound was the crunch of snow under my boots and the wind pushing against my jacket. About halfway there, I noticed something ahead on the road. At first, I thought it was just another snowbank. As I got closer, I realized it was a snowplow. It had crashed into a tree on the side of the road. The front was tilted slightly, and the engine was still running. The headlights were on, cutting through the falling snow. But there was no driver. I stopped a few feet away and looked around. There were no footprints leading away from the plow, no signs of anyone climbing out. The snow around the vehicle was completely untouched. That didn't make sense. I called out, asking if anyone was there. My voice sounded wrong in the open air, like it didn't belong. No one answered. I stepped closer and looked inside the cab. The driver's seat was empty. The door was closed. Everything looked normal. Too normal. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. I decided to leave and call for help once I reached my friend's house. As I turned around, I heard something that made my heart stop. Someone was screaming. It sounded like a man yelling for help, his voice strained and desperate. The strange part wasn't the scream itself. It was how close it sounded, as if the person was standing just behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The screaming stopped instantly. I didn't wait to hear it again. I ran the rest of the way to my friend's house, slipping in the snow, barely able to breathe by the time I reached his door. Once inside, I told him everything and called the police. An officer arrived about 30 minutes later after the storm had slowed. We went back to the spot together. The snowplow was gone. There were no tire tracks, no broken branches on the tree, no signs of an accident at all. The road looked untouched, like nothing had ever happened there. The officer checked his radio and then looked at me. He told me there were no snowplows assigned to that area that night. According to their records, no vehicles had reported an accident, no emergency calls had come in. I asked about the screaming. He said there were no other reports. Before leaving, the officer did one last thing. He shined his flashlight on the ground where the plow had been. There were no footprints. Not mine. Not anyone else's. Just smooth, freshly fallen snow. The police left shortly after, suggesting stress or fear caused by the storm. My friend offered to let me stay the night, and I accepted without hesitation. I didn't sleep. The next morning, the storm had completely buried the roads. Snowplows were out everywhere, clearing the streets. Every time I heard one pass, I felt sick, because deep down, I knew something. Whatever I saw that night was never meant to be there at all. I was a high school senior when this happened, and it took place during one of the worst snowstorms our town had seen in years. School had let out early that day, but public transportation was still running, barely. I took a bus that dropped me off near the edge of town, about a 15-minute walk from my house. Normally, it was an easy walk. That night, it felt much longer. The snow was falling hard, thick enough to blur the trees and swallow sound. The road was already buried, and the sidewalks were barely visible. I remember thinking how quiet everything felt, like the storm had erased the world beyond a few feet in front of me. Halfway home, I decided to take a shortcut through a small wooded area. I'd used it dozens of times before, even at night. I didn't think twice. A few minutes into the path, I heard something behind me. Footsteps. At first, I assumed it was just my own echo, but when I stopped walking, the sound didn't stop immediately. It took one more step, then went quiet. I turned around. About 20 feet back, standing between the trees, was a man. He was tall and unnaturally thin, wearing no winter clothes, just dark pants and a light shirt despite the freezing temperature. His face was pale, and when he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. We stared at each other for a few seconds. Neither of us spoke. Then he took a step toward me. I backed up and asked if he needed help. My voice sounded weak in the cold air. He didn't answer. He just kept smiling. That's when I ran. The sound of footsteps followed me immediately, faster than before. I could hear them clearly now, too light, almost playful. What scared me most was that I never heard him breathing. I burst out of the woods and ran the rest of the way home, nearly slipping on the ice-covered street. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I stood there for a long time, listening. Nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself I was safe. Maybe he was just some unstable person who wandered off. I went upstairs to my bedroom and tried to calm down. About 30 minutes later, I felt something was wrong. The room felt watched. I slowly turned toward my window. He was standing outside, barefoot in the snow. He was close enough that I could see the frost forming on his skin. He stood completely still, staring straight at me, that same empty smile frozen on his face. I stumbled backward and called the police immediately. I never took my eyes off the window until I heard sirens outside. When the officers arrived, the man was gone. They searched the yard and then followed footsteps leading away from my house toward the woods. I watched from the doorway as their flashlights moved through the snow. Then they stopped. The footprints ended abruptly in the middle of the yard. No drag marks, no signs of struggle, just footprints that suddenly weren't there anymore. The officers exchanged looks and told me it was probably someone experiencing homelessness who wandered off and would likely freeze in the storm. They advised my parents to keep the doors locked and left soon after. That explanation never sat right with me. The man hadn't looked cold. He hadn't looked confused. He looked patient. I never saw him again after that night. But every winter, after a heavy snowfall, I still checked my window before going to sleep, because sometimes, in the morning, I find barefoot footprints in the snow below my room. They don't lead toward the house. They lead away.